Before we begin, viewer discretion is advised. What you are about to witness is not a gentle interview, not a cordial morning chat over coffee and harmless jokes. No, today's tale is a stylized dramatization, a legend forged from whispers of what if. It is the imagined story of what happens when a titan of the silver screen wanders into the gladiatorial theater of daytime television and finds himself opposite a queen of televised confrontation. This is not a debate. This is spectacle. The viewers watching at home had no clue that history, albeit fictionalized, was set to unfold. The cameras rolled, the applause sign lit up, the host smiled, but underneath that polished surface, a battlefield, the studio that morning shimmered under blazing lights, hot as the noonday sun over a Roman Colosseum. On one side of the table sat fictional Tom Hardy, renowned for bringing to life warriors, villains, and men forged in psychological fire. He arrived on this fictional program for what his team assured him would be a simple promotional appearance, a harmless chat, a handshake, a laugh or two, but destiny, as legends often teach us, does not honor itineraries. Across from him sat the fictionalized Joy Behar, not the kindly entertainer, but the heightened persona of this dramatic retelling. Her eyes sparkled with the recognizable glint of a strategist prepared for verbal conquest. She had studied every interview, every quote, every ambiguous comment she might twist into ammunition. She believed she had the upper hand. The co-hosts fictionalized Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and the rest exchanged nervous murmurs even before the broadcast went live. They sensed a storm forming. A chill of anticipation crept across the panel. Something electric, something unpredictable, was about to erupt. The director's countdown began. 3, 2, 1, broadcast begins. Joy opened with a smile, the kind that looked pleasant from afar, but carried a razor, edge up close. She struck first, launching her opening question like a spear cloaked in velvet. "Tom," she said sweetly, "you've made some intense comments about method acting over the years. Some people think that's just a fancy way of letting actors behave badly. Don't you think there should be limits?" The audience leaned forward. The producers tensed. Even the camera seemed to zoom in with predatory intent. Hardy did not react immediately. He leaned back casually, arms relaxed, but his eyes, those sharp ice blue eyes, locked on Joy with calculated precision. Silence enveloped the room, a silence that didn't merely fill the air, it owned the air. Then the counterstrike. "Well, Joy," he began, voice low and rumbling like distant thunder, "I believe there is a tremendous difference between discipline and misbehavior, between dedication to a craft and using one's job as an excuse to act like a fool." The words were delivered not with anger, but surgical calm, the tone of someone who knew exactly where to cut. He continued, "Method acting, when done properly, is an exercise in focus. It is respect for the story, the character, the audience. It is not a shield for tantrums. It is not permission for poor behavior. And perhaps," he added, pausing just long enough for tension to snap tight as wire, "you might not recognize the distinction." A gasp flickered through the room like a spark skipping across dry brush. Joy's smile faltered only for a heartbeat, but in battle, a heartbeat is an eternity. Her fingers tightened around the note cards she'd prepared so meticulously. She refused to retreat. She tried again. "That sounds awfully noble," she said with her trademark laugh, though slightly more brittle now. "But don't actors take it too far? I mean staying in character all day, pretending to be someone else. Doesn't that blur the line between art and madness?" Tom tilted his head, slightly a predator, assessing whether the prey still wished to run. "Blurring the line," he replied, "is precisely where art lives. Actors willingly explore uncomfortable spaces so audiences don't have to. Creativity without risk is just decoration." The audience reacted louder this time. Fictional co-hosts looked between them like sports commentators watching a game suddenly spike in intensity. Joy's patience thinned. She fired again, faster now, questioning old statements, dragging up interviews from years before, a barrage of talking points. But each time, Hardy deflected the attack with calm, precise articulation. Not arrogance, not aggression, simply mastery of his craft, words. Bit by bit, the fictional Joy found her footing slipping. The persona she wielded so effortlessly, the queen of interruptions, could not crack his conversational armor. Finally, Hardy delivered the line that would earn its place in this fictional tale's hall of memorable dialogue. "You know, Joy," he said almost sympathetically, "sometimes it seems critics prefer conflict over understanding, but I'd rather build something meaningful than tear someone down for sport." The panel froze. The audience inhaled sharply. "Game, set, match." Joy leaned back, regrouping, her expression masking a flurry of recalculations. She was not defeated. Queens do not fall easily, but this round belonged to the visiting warrior. Hardy adjusted his jacket absently, as if the entire exchange had been nothing more than stretching before a stunt scene. And that, dear viewers of fiction and fun, is how a routine interview transformed in this playful dramatization into an unforgettable exchange of wit, poise, and verbal swordplay. The cameras kept rolling, but the legend had already been sealed. Her voice sharpens now, honing itself into the very cutting edge that once made her a legend in the realm of confrontational daytime television. It slices through the charged studio air with the precision of an experienced duelist. "Oh, please, Tom," she scoffs, leaning back in her chair, as if the dismissal itself releases her from any obligation to take him seriously. Everyone on set has heard the storied tales, actors who insist they are in character, but who in truth are using the excuse to be insufferable, uncooperative, or downright rude. Joy speaks with the authority of someone accustomed to shaping public opinion with a single arching eyebrow. "Surely," she continues, her tone swelling with condescension, "you can concede that some of this method acting business is nothing but pretentious nonsense." "Pretentious nonsense?" Hardy repeats the phrase, but his voice is calm, unnervingly so. His accent lends each syllable a deliberate, surgical weight, as though he is dissecting her words rather than responding to them. He does not raise his voice. He does not need to. Silence is his ally. "Precision is his weapon. That," he says after a measured pause, "is a fascinating diagnosis, coming from an individual who has built a career offering verdicts on professions they have never practiced." A subtle ripple of tension moves through the room. Joy straightens in her seat, sensing the air tilt against her, but Hardy is not finished. "Tell me, Joy," he continues, his tone deceptively gentle, "what is your formal training in the dramatic arts? What gives you the authority to dismiss techniques that have served actors for generations?" A dead, heavy silence descends upon the studio, broken only by the soft, mechanical whir of the cameras, tracking every twitch of expression. A flush of crimson rises along Joy's neck and blooms across her face. She is utterly unprepared, to have her own credentials interrogated. She is the inquisitor. She is never the subject. That is the unspoken hierarchy of her world. Today, the hierarchy is failing her. "I've been in this business for over 20 years. Joy snaps back, though the rise in her pitch betrays her growing distress. "I think I know a thing or two about what is genuine and what is merely actors being self-indulgent." 20 years of what, precisely? Hardy inquires. There is no malice in his tone, only sincere curiosity, which somehow makes the question more devastating. He tilts his head, studying her the way one might study a puzzling artifact. The other hosts exchange uneasy glances. Joy blinks. The question lands with the force of a silent explosion. 20 years. Hardy says, leaning forward, of observing from behind a desk, offering commentary, "Because unless I am profoundly mistaken, your own experience in performance is, shall we say," he allows the pause to expand just long enough to sting, "quite limited, is it not? You've done stand-up, you've hosted, but you have never been tasked with the complete dissolution of self for a role, have you?" Whoopi immediately moves, sensing the confrontation has breached containment. "Now, let's not," she begins, but Joy, wounded pride blazing behind her eyes, cuts her off with a dismissive wave. "I don't need to have climbed Mount Everest to know that it is tall, Tom," she says, her sarcasm lacquered so thickly it gleams under the studio lights. "And I don't need to be a method actor to spot when someone is using it as an excuse." Hardy's expression remains a serene mask, but something beneath it changes. A predatory stillness, the kind found in a chess grandmaster who has just watched his opponent walk directly into a fatal trap. His next words glide out softly, dangerously so. "That," he murmurs, "is in fact the perfect analogy. You're correct, Joy. You do not need to climb Everest to know its height. He allows a small, almost imperceptible smile. But you would need to be a mountaineer to critique a climber's technique, would you not? You would need a deep understanding of rope work, of oxygen systems, of weather patterns, of the actual, hard-won expertise required to make such a climb, not merely an opinion from the base camp. The metaphor lands like a hammer wrapped in velvet. Around them, the other hosts are in open distress. Sarah Haynes shuffles her note cards aimlessly, her eyes darting between Joy and the camera feed. Whoopi sends increasingly frantic looks toward the producers off-screen, silently pleading for someone to cut to commercial, roll a clip, anything to interrupt the freefall, but no interruption comes. Joy inhales sharply, her voice fraying at the edges. "Are you suggesting I'm not qualified to have opinions?" "Not at all," Hardy replies, the word delivered like a silken blade. "You are eminently qualified to possess opinions. We all are." His voice softens, which somehow makes the impact sharper. However, there is a chasm between holding a personal opinion and issuing authoritative judgments on professional disciplines in which you have never participated. Surely, he leans back, his gaze unwavering. A veteran of the media, such as yourself, can appreciate that distinction. The studio feels colder now. The interview has shattered its script, lost its structure, and veered into territory no producer could salvage. Joy's composure is unraveling, thread by thread. "You know what, Tom?" she says finally, reaching for whatever dignity she can gather. Her smile is brittle, her tone dipped in bitter sarcasm. "I think you're proving my point perfectly. All of this intellectual posturing." She sneers, though the emotion behind it is raw, wounded. "Exactly what I mean. And the cameras capture everything." Joy's eyes burned with defiance as she fired back, her voice sharpened like a blade dragged along concrete. This overwhelming need to sound so profound and important, she declared, gesturing with a flourish toward the cameras. "That is exactly the pretension I'm talking about when I criticize method acting." Her imaginary phrasing struck like arrows meant to pierce armor, but the warrior across from her, he didn't flinch. Tom Hardy, or rather, the dramatic persona this tale has sculpted, tilted his head. For the first time in this interview-turned arena, a smile curled at the corner of his mouth. Not a soft smile, not a warm smile. No, this was a victor's smile. The smile of a swordsman who suddenly realized the opponent had handed him the very weapon needed to end the fight. "Intellectual posturing," he repeated quietly, tasting the words. He placed them on the table like a challenge. "Joy, I have answered every one of your questions directly, honestly, patiently. I've respected your criticisms, considered them carefully, and responded with substance. If that is what you label pretentious," he leaned forward, "then perhaps that says more about your relationship to thoughtful conversation than it says about me." It was not shouted. It did not need to be. The impact detonated in silence. For a suspended moment, time itself seemed to hesitate. The audience, the crew, the hosts, all silent witnesses to a shift no one saw coming. Joy's mouth opened, but no words arrived. She was a general watching her army break ranks and flee, a queen momentarily without throne or crown. Her expression was the raw panic of someone realizing the sword she forged has been turned against her. Hardy pressed forward, not cruelly, but with that calm certainty of someone who knows he has the floor. "You questioned my methods," he continued, "and I explained them. You pushed back, and I asked why. You dismissed my responses as pretentious instead of addressing them. And now," his voice now was a polished blade, elegant, cold, unhurried, "I observe simply that rejecting a sincere exchange on the grounds that it feels too intellectual might reveal the limitations of one's own arsenal." The camera operators reacted like seasoned war correspondents, zooming in, capturing every fracture of Joy's composure. The fictional audience felt a tremor. The panel braced for structural collapse. "This is absurd." Joy finally stammered, the voice trembling not with anger, but with retreat. "I'm just trying to have a normal conversation. Are you trying to be some kind of philosopher? King here, Hardy. Are you Perry's or something?" Hardy's eyebrow rose, a slow and precise arch that could have been storyboarded. For a heartbeat, even oxygen paused to observe it. "From my position," he replied, "it appears you stepped into this arena with the ending already written. You decided method acting is nonsense. You came prepared to declare anyone who defended it unreasonable." He paused. You were not searching for answers, only confirmation. Joy's face flushed crimson beneath the bright studio, lighting a battleground spotlight exposing vulnerability she never intended to reveal. That, Hardy finished, isn't a conversation, Joy. That is a tribunal whose verdict was written before the trial began. Silence, a cavernous, trembling silence. Joy's expression flickered through a kaleidoscope of emotions: fury, disbelief, wounded pride, and a dawning understanding that she had been pushed into unfamiliar territory, being the one analyzed instead of the analyzer. The other hosts shrunk instinctively, as if attempting to blend into their chairs. Perhaps if they stayed still enough, they would disappear. Maybe we're straying a little, Whoopi murmured, her voice a diplomatic olive branch tossed carefully into the no man's land between them. Let's dial it back, yes, but Hardy's focus remained locked, respectful, yet unwavering. On the contrary, he replied, we are at the very heart of the matter. Joy bristled. I'm not hostile toward anything. She insisted, though even she seemed unsure whom she was trying to convince, Hardy or herself. Of course. Hardy said evenly, there are actors who misuse method techniques, just as there are television hosts who misuse their platforms, choosing to attack instead of explore, diminish instead of discuss. He didn't blink. And yet we wouldn't judge an entire profession based on its worst examples, would we? The phrase landed like a siege ram slamming into castle gates, a direct hit, precise, undeniable. Joy's eyes widened. This was not how the script was supposed to go. This fictionalized Tom Hardy wasn't merely defending, he had seized command of the narrative and marched it straight into Joy's territory. That's completely different. She countered, but her voice was hollow, the first faint crack in the walls she had built so meticulously around her authority. Is it? Hardy asked gently, and in that softness lay the sharpest cut of all. The audience fictional as they are sat spellbound, not cheering, not laughing, simply watching the balance of power tilt in real time. Then Hardy delivered the closing sentiment, not as a blow, but as a conclusion. Dialogue is not a battle to be won, Joy. It is an exchange, one built on curiosity, respect, and a willingness to listen. His voice softened further. I hope truly that is what we can have here. For the first time, Joy said nothing. Her silence, louder than any retort, mocked the end of this round. The cameras kept rolling. The world kept breathing. But in the arena of this imagined morning show coliseum, one truth had become undeniable. The warrior had taken the field, and the queen would need to regroup before the next strike. Inquires, Hardy says, the words slipping out with quiet precision. His tone is one of authentic curiosity, so disarmingly genuine that it destabilizes Joy more than any insult could have. He leans forward slightly, hands folded with the calm assurance of someone who understands. He holds the intellectual high ground. You propose, he continues, that we judge an entire artistic discipline by its most flawed practitioners. Very well. I am suggesting, then, that we apply the same standard to television hosting. What principle makes one critique valid and the other forbidden? The question hangs in the air like a charged wire. Before Joy can formulate a retort, Sarah Haynes, who has been watching the exchange with widening eyes, attempts a diplomatic intervention. Perhaps, she says nervously, we could discuss the new film. But Joy, unable to let the challenge stand, cuts her off with an impatient flick of her hand. You are twisting my words, Tom, she snaps, the simmer in her voice now boiling toward a full-fledged eruption. I never suggested we judge all method actors by the few. Hardy's expression remains one of infinite patience. His composure does not crack, and that serenity only sharpens the impact of his reply. When he speaks, it is almost Socratic, like a teacher gently correcting a pupil who has misread the very first line of the assigned text. Actually, Joy, he says, your precise words were that method acting is pretentious nonsense and an excuse to behave badly. That strikes me as a generalization of the broadest possible order. He pauses, then adds with immaculate politeness, would you like me to ask the producers to roll the tape? The offer hangs between them like a public executioner's blade. Everyone understands what replaying her own words would mean. Joy shifts in her chair. The unease radiates off her in waves. The realization that millions of viewers are witnessing this on-air vivisection slowly spreads across her face. I believe, she says sharply, that you are being intentionally obtuse. Her voice has hardened into a brittle shield of defensiveness. Obtuse. Hardy repeats the word softly, savoring it. A hint of amusement glimmers in his tone. Joy, I have been nothing if not direct. You made an assertion. I questioned that assertion. You attacked my question, and I noted how that attack might reasonably be perceived. Which part of that logical sequence strikes you as obtuse? Joy is in a free fall now. Her standard arsenal, the interruptions, the deflections, the ad hominem strikes, fails her completely. They are useless against an opponent who refuses to be baited, who responds only with calm reasoning, and who insists on following every thread of logic to its inexorable conclusion. You're just playing word games, she accuses, but the weakness of the charge is plain to all. It is a last-ditch attempt, a flailing grasp at an eroding ledge. Word games. Hardy lifts his eyebrows, visibly astonished by the accusation. Joy, words are the very currency of ideas. If you find yourself uncomfortable with their precise application, he allows a beat of silence. Perhaps this medium is not your natural habitat. A collective inhale sweeps across the studio. The implication that a veteran host, one of daytime television's most recognizable faces, is unfit for her own platform is catastrophic. Audible gasps escape the other hosts. Off camera, members of the production crew signal in frantic, silent gestures, attempting to regain control of the spiraling situation. Joy's face drains of color, then floods with a furious, blistering red. How dare you, she demands, nearly rising from her chair. How dare you imply I don't belong here? I have been a titan of this industry longer than you have been a professional actor. Have you, though? Hardy asks quietly. The question lands with more force than a shouted accusation. It is devastating precisely because it is spoken without aggression, without theatrics, without malice, just simple inquiry. I mean. He continues, what is the metric for success? Because from this vantage point, he gestures lightly toward their tense set. Your entire methodology seems engineered to generate heat, not light. You deploy loaded questions. You silence thoughtful answers with interruptions. And you attack guests for failing to follow your script. He pauses. Is that success, or is that merely performance art? The surgical precision of the diagnosis is breathtaking. Every viewer watching at home recognizes the truth in his description of her style, and the fact that he is demonstrating that truth in real time makes the moment unforgettable, an instant, irreversible fracture in the show's carefully constructed facade. I ask probing questions. Joy fires back, but her voice trembles with rage, and something else, fear. That is the work of a journalist. Journalist? Hardy repeats the word, and though his tone is still calm, the word itself hangs between them like an indictment. Joy, when was the last story you broke? When was your last piece of investigative reporting? When did you last do anything other than broadcast your opinion about the work of others? The blow is surgical, merciless not in cruelty, but in truth. The world is now witnessing not the craft of journalism, but the spectacle of a professional provocateur, one who built her career on confrontation, one who believed she could ambush any guest, one who is now flailing against a man who refuses to be drawn into her orchestrated theatrics. The chasm between reporting and punditry has been laid bare on national television, and with surgical, devastating precision, Hardy has placed Joy squarely in the latter category. Whoopi, sensing the impending collapse, perhaps even the threat to the show's very reputation, makes one final attempt to call for a cease. Fire, Tom, she interjects in a desperate tone. Perhaps we should, but Joy is beyond rescue now. Pride wounded, authority challenged, composure shattered, she faces the agonizing, slow-motion catastrophe of losing a battle on her own turf, before an audience of millions who will replay this moment for years to come. And Hardy sits across from her, unmoved, calm, controlled, the eye of a storm he did not start, but one he has mastered.